बाई मी धरण धरण बांधते माझ मरण मरण कांडते झुंजू ग झालं पीठ जात्यात आटलं कणी कोंडा मी रांधते बाई मी धरण धरण बांधते दिस कासऱ्याला आला जीव माग ओटाळला तानले करू माझले करू पाठी खाली मी बांधते बाई मी धरण धरण बांधते.
When we've sat in a collective, we've wondered that why those that are most impacted by the climate crisis, whether it's the disproportionate burden between at a country level, right? Like if you look at the global north and the south, or between communities itself, which are divided by gender, caste, race, and other such intersections, why are they never taking decisions on what should be really done to mitigate or adapt this climate crisis? And those whose everyday realities and their vulnerabilities have been reshaped again and again by whenever there's a climate disaster, be it a heat wave, a flood, or a drought, or whatever it is, are pushed further into vicious cycles of deprivation. While scientists, researchers, academics, or let's just call them the gatekeepers of climate science and policy, continue to push solutions that do not address the vulnerability of people, and this vulnerability then just compounds. So we needed to find ontologically and epistemologically pathways that address this gap, which are not Western, which are not neo-colonial, and that respond to the crisis addressing intersectional vulnerability while not taking away people's agency and voice. The majority world, which I'm referring to as the global south, continues to bear a larger brunt of the climate crisis than the richer and wealthier countries which have contributed the least. Now, for example, in the year 2019, 48% of total CO2 emissions were due to actions of the top 10 emitters, while the bottom 50% emitters contributed only 12% of the CO2 emissions taken together. In countries like India, there is an increasing recognition of climate impacting women, and especially women of certain groups based on their occupation, caste, location being impacted the most. And this is in every aspect of their life, whether it's in the care work they do, their health, their participation in the workforce. Women are affected differently, and climate change exacerbates the inequalities that they're already facing in society.
This gender-transformative climate framework was built on core feminist and gender-transformative principles. It has been shaped by foundational feminist research principles centered on driving social change, amplifying diverse women's voices, and challenging the unequal power structures through inclusive, value-based knowledge. Now, the conceptualization process itself was carried out in two phases. In the first phase, we undertook an extensive review of the existing literature to really understand how is the framing of the problem and what is the main discourse around gender and climate change, both globally and in India. And through this review, we examined various theories and frameworks related to gender and climate change to understand how the problems of climate change and gender inequities were understood in those contexts. Key discourses, including colonial histories, the global North-South divide, feminist political ecology, and climate justice, formed the foundation of this analysis. All of these were contextualized for women in the global south, especially those facing intersectional marginalization. The gender climate interventions, especially, were shaped by a blend of practical experience and research. Now, once we had this first draft, we undertook a series of stakeholder interviews to seek inputs and feedback and really refine it further. For this, we conducted in-depth conversations with several stakeholders and organizations who have been working in the space of gender and climate change. And these were stakeholders who were working across diverse sectors, including sectors like health, livelihood, agriculture, financial inclusion, and women's labor. And to facilitate open-ended, deep conversations, we used a feminist methodology, which is known as listening exercise, which is actually designed to center participants' voices and lived experiences. We actually explored participants' views on gendered impacts of climate change, sought their feedback on proposed framework, priority areas for its scope, and the potential gender transformative solutions.
The framework also recognizes that power asymmetries between genders is the root cause of differentiated vulnerability. And this plays out in the roles that different genders play, their access to resources and assets, and ability to take decisions about the body, home, society, and other spheres of life. These basic causes result in increased vulnerabilities for climate. For example, gendered roles within households and in society place the burden of fulfilling household basic needs like water, firewood, and the burden of caregiving on women, which results in disproportionately higher impact of climate change to them. One of the biggest themes that came up was leadership. And this came up across all the stakeholder interviews we had. And not leadership as an abstract concept, but for the feminine to actually create their own narratives by contextualizing climate in their own context. For example, how does one build leadership of women journalists, especially at the grassroots, to write their own stories on climate, breaking barriers around language? The second big theme that came up was vulnerability, where the impacts and vulnerability to climate change can be addressed by ensuring social protection. As evidence has shown us, and even those conversations we had with multiple women, that social protection schemes respond to climate extremes like floods, storms, and droughts. So the literature on social protection and climate change suggests that it can provide adaptation measures like shifting livelihood strategies or even protecting homes. And finally, benefits, where we're looking at initiatives not just to survive the climate crisis, but how do we thrive and renew in the face of this crisis? So benefits became a really important theme for us. And an example of this is when you look at the just transition or the discourse around energy transition, the shift to 100% renewable and sustainable society cannot happen by the transfer of power from one hegemonic industry, which is the fossil fuel industry, to another. So a gender just transition or a feminist just transition will shift power to, say, cooperatives, micro and small scale industry, as well as social enterprises, which are likely to be run by women and gender diverse people.
Both Neha and I feel that this is a dynamic framework which will keep evolving over time with newer learnings and experiences. And we really look forward to its future iterations.
You can be brave and courageous enough, no matter who you are. You can create your own framework. You don't have to follow ours. You can just pick points, what suits you, and just create your own climate framework. That's what at least I want to leave people with. Don't limit yourselves to what you hear others say.